Back at Shelf Life Studios, No Blueprint Podcast, and today we have a special guest in the house.
Hey.
Sherrell Dorsey.
It's so good to be here. It's so good to be home.
Yes.
Gosh.
Yes. We're so excited to have you.
It's insane though. It's insane to be like in a neighborhood that has changed so drastically.
Yeah.
And to like have that moment where you crave like a piece of the community that you remember and they're like, oh, that's not there anymore.
Right.
Because I just knew I was going to get some fried catfish and greens from Red Apple. And then it was like, oh, but like Red Apple don't exist no more. You're just like, okay,
Crushed,
so
heartbroken.
on to plan number 2.
Right. Side note, so this space actually that we're in right now is a community project that we Maya and I are working on, where we're gathering stories of folks who have either lived or worked or done business in the neighborhood. And so we're starting a small podcast, separate podcast about that. So I'm working on 3 podcasts right now, but a separate podcast just with stories from community folks like the ones you see right behind you.
This is awesome.
Yes.
I love this.
Yeah. So I told you a little bit about the podcast. We're speaking to entrepreneurs, but the center around our podcast is around culture and how that really like helped you in your passion and in your journey through this, right? And I think your story is wonderful and connects through that.
Yeah.
We're gonna work on not tapping on the table.
I'm not going to tap any table,
Okay.
but I'm going to drink my water.
Do that. Okay. Cool. So my first question, who are you?
My name is Sherrell Dorsey. I am Seattle born and bred, through and through. Grew up in the south end, so between Skyway and Rainier Beach. Went to St. Therese, Zion Prep, Hawthorne Elementary, Meany Middle School, graduated from Franklin High School. And I am a social entrepreneur. I am a data and tech journalist. And I think most of all, like I'm a community builder. So no matter where I've lived in about 6 different cities in the U.S. So between New York, Newark, Bridgeport, Charlotte, various places in Jersey, LA for a stint. I've always tried to find ways to be part of the community, bring my talents, my skills, but most of all, speak to people about their stories and write about their stories, write about the innovators and the folks that we don't always look at as everyday heroes that are doing significant things.
That's legit. And tell us about your businesses.
My business is yeah. So I run the plugdaily.com, which is the daily tech newsletter that covers founders and innovators of color. So I launched that back in April of 2016. I had been writing about innovators of color outside of Silicon Valley specifically, and really got to a place where, as I was reading and trying to stay on top of business and tech news, I realized there's just not a lot of representation of what was going on with people of color. And I'm like, I know software engineers, I know people with dynamic tech businesses that we're not covering as rigorously as we are covering Gates and Zuckerberg. So that was an experiment of, are people even, interested in hearing every single day, like what's happening in terms of innovation from the perspective of a person of color, a woman of color. And then I also have Black Tech Charlotte, again, started off as an experiment, really trying to create a more diverse entrepreneurial ecosystem. So Charlotte is one of those cities that is growing exponentially. I think they'll have about 1 million people in the city that have moved to the city within the next couple of months. And the tech scene is growing in the Southeast. But the challenge is that even though Charlotte is diverse, you don't see that reflected in the way that businesses are being built or the ecosystem is being cultivated. And I think that there is opportunity for us to make sure that, folks of color are on the docket. But, again, someone kind of needed to step up and make that happen. So Black Tech Charlotte has been alive for the last year. And in 2018, we're opening an office space. We're really trying to be that go-to place for if recruiters are looking for diverse talent, they're coming to us first. So those 2 things I've been running. And then I'm also in grad school at Columbia. Check out rocking my sweatshirt.
That little thing, that little school.
That little school, that little, you might have heard of it, maybe not. But yeah, I'm in a data journalism program, and so got to a place where I wanted to continue to refine my craft, but most of all, get very granular in the things that I was studying. And I feel like there's no one looking at, I don't want to say no one, I think there's some people who are doing some pretty covert work right now from an academic-based research perspective, but there's not a ton of public discussion, reporting, or what have you that's measuring what's happening in the tech ecosystem as it relates to people of color who will be outnumbering kind of the our Caucasian counterparts by the year 2020. And so there's a lot of activity, but no one's really charting that or documenting it in a substantial way. And I think that if we take the data, which is going to be historic, and start mapping it with what exists now, we can also start to find some areas of opportunity in our communities to address some major issues.
Wow. So you're busy.
Right.
Yeah, that's why I day drink on Sundays with 3 mimosas.
Hey. That's super awesome. I want to go back, but not too far back because I know we're limited on time. But I want to go back to you growing up. Who were some of the folks who showed you that you could do what you are doing now, that it was all possible? Or were there folks that showed you that that the life that you live now was actually possible?
Yeah, I think that there were quite a few people who really kind of they lived their lives, and as I was observing, it allowed me to sort of see that they had no limitations on their lives. So, I mean, for my mom, like being a huge community social person, watching her MC events, spearhead initiatives, whether it was for, great houses and families for children, to, canvassing for various politicians who were about change in community justice, like Bob Santos, who passed away this last year. Those are the individuals that, I grew up, breaking bread with them at the dinner table, spending holidays, in their lives. And so I got to see from that lens this idea around organizing and community and power from people of color across all spectrums. And so so I think that was kind of a touch point of there's a sense of commitment and obligation that we have to our communities in terms of no one is just going to create policies and opportunity for you out the kindness of their heart. Right. You have to fight for it. And I watched these individuals sitting meetings, and even though I was a little kid, maybe playing tic-tac-toe or something random, like I got to see that firsthand with my friends' parents. We were playing in the playroom, but they were always together organizing in some kind of capacity. Right. So I would say that was one of the first touch points. I also danced. I had been going to Iwajo since the time I was 3. Eventually went to Rainer Dance Center. So Shar Younger owned Rainer Dance Center at the time, and she, I remember her breaking her foot. I was taking tap, and I had gotten really, really good. And so when she broke her foot, she asked me to come in and sub for her. It was my first time teaching. Right. And I did so well that she let me start to teach classes on Saturdays.
How old were you?
I was 12.
Wow.
So I was 12 at the time, right? So I was 12. So yeah, Saturdays I would teach 2 or 3 classes. So I would advance. And Shar was an entrepreneur. She also worked full time at the University of Washington as a nurse. And I mean, she ran that dance studio for as long as I can remember. I think she sold it about 2 years ago. I think she wanted me to have it, but I never came back to Seattle like permanently. But she invested in me. Not only was it like, yes, you can teach dance, I'll pay you to teach dance. So I was, I'm 12 years old, cashing my little $100 checks every weekend, thought I was just out here making it rain. But but that was someone who, would pick me up, take me home, had a relationship with my mom, bought me tap shoes because I was going through tap shoes like crazy. Right. So that was a community person who invested in me to this day. Like, it's still like sending me cards, and, we still communicate. Monica McAfee, which is, I love this story because I spent so much time with her and her family, to the point where like literally my mom's like, well, I'm going out of town. You can stay at the McAfee's house. Yeah. And Monica opened up a hair salon in her mother-in-law unit. Yeah. So I watched her convert this entire space into her place of business. I remember watching her get up at 6 a.m. to get ready for a client. I saw her, I would go with her to the beauty supply store so she could purchase her products. I saw the process of customer service, of counting inventory, of hiring someone to clean the shop so that she can have a fresh, clean workspace for the day. I saw her interact with her customers. I saw what she did for customers who may not have had the resources. And she's like, well, I'll put you on a payment plan because I know that presentation is important to you, or I know that presentation is important to the work that you do. And so I got to see that firsthand. Benita Thomas, who opened up a spot over in the Rainier Valley, I saw her open up a hair salon, and I got to go with her when she was deciding on the interior. What was that going to look like? I saw her negotiating the lease. So I got to observe and be in the same room with women who were literally deciding, this is the kind of way that I'm serving my community. Yeah. And these were very educated women who said, I want to do a business that is going to provide space and opportunity for others to thrive. And I think that by default, I saw that and I realized I don't have to go the status quo route. Right. And I saw these women create out of nothing. And so even in high school, from teaching dance, I started teaching private lessons. So I built up a business on that end. During high school. And then I might go work at the hair salon, sweep up some hair, talk to clients. I do that right before going to school. So it was always this training and incubation period. And I even tell folks, I'm like, we spend a lot of money on, go to this incubator, blah, 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 blah. It's like, but what if we put resources towards those community businesses and create apprenticeship programs? Because that's what I had. Right. It's not always sending them to, the top tech star situation. It's that person that does hold the hair salon across the street, they can teach skills in alignment with what's happening in the community. So why not resource them to be able to provide those opportunities? So anyway, that was my start. It wasn't super high, level, but it was you treat people well. You treat people well, you build, you give back to your community. And on top of that, the women that, I will say raised me in the realm of entrepreneurship, they drove fly cars. They wore fly clothes. They went to concerts. They traveled the world. They got to live their life on their own terms. Absolutely. And even though others didn't agree with the way that they lived their lives, it was you can't say anything to me because I make my own money. I work hard, so I play hard. So that was kind of my experience, and I think that's what they showed me early on, and so I was always striving for that.
Nice. Although the foundation doesn't relate to what you do now, it was still a very pivotal starting point for you. It's amazing. You had a lot of strong role models surrounding you.
Absolutely. And I think I had to look back on those experiences and really appreciate them, because I think back to the strength of women in my life and the reality of these women took me under their wing. They did not have to at all. They never had to. And they did more than just allow me to work there. They were embedded in my life and in my survival. And there's still people who, when I come home, it's I'm going to go stop and sit at their kitchen counter and talk. They were invested. And I think that that's how communities thrive. Yeah. Because I think about my own responsibility and sort of why, even I have Black Tech Charlotte. Right. And now that we have a physical space, although I definitely pride on having the ability to be remote in my work, I realized how much the physical space mattered to my sense of identity and community. And so now that we're stepping into opening this physical space in the Innovation District at Camp North End, which was formerly a distribution center for Rite Aid. Before that, it was a place during World War II. They built missiles. So the architecture it tells this crazy story. And then before that, Henry Ford built Model Ts. So it has this ongoing history of just incredible innovation. Yeah. And so now as I look at, we only have 1,200 square feet of this particular subset of property. But when I think about what is going to be the significance of us having a space and not just like, let's have a party or let's just work out of here, but how do we make this open, available to the community? And now I can take on that role that the women in my life took on for me.
Absolutely.
How do I make that happen?
Right.
You know, because I don't even know if they realized that it was, I don't know if it was deliberate or intentional on their end, you know, but I'm thinking that I have to do that. Otherwise, I just have a space. But if I don't have a space that serves anyone, it's a waste of space. I mean, at the end of the day.
Right.
So, when did you realize the importance that these women played in your life? Because I know a lot of times I work with youth, and sometimes they don't really think about things, which makes sense. I mean, you're kind of like in the moment. You don't think about how certain things have played a role in your life or how it's affected you. So yeah, when did you realize? Or was there not necessarily one pivotal moment, or was it like a series?
I think it was definitely sitting back and reevaluating where I've come from. I think having an appreciation for being from Seattle, what that has meant, walking through all the experiences that I've had. Because I will say, I think I was really ungrateful. I felt as though there was a sense of entitlement. Like, yes, of course, if I do X, Y, and Z, if I'm a good student, I'm in these programs, I'm out here killing it, of course I deserve X, Y, and Z. Right. And so I think that I took those relationships for granted, so to speak. And so it really took me understanding that not everyone has communities like the one I grew up in. They don't have villages like the one that I grew up in. But it took me almost leaving and to see how other people experience life, to realize I have lived very well.
Right.
And not from a standpoint of like, I never had to suffer or work for something, but in the sense of there were literally people around me that were investing in my well-being, whether I saw it or not, you know, from the folks that, and my mom was a single mom, so it was like, from the folks that would pick me up from after school because my mom had to work late and she couldn't come and get me, but they were like, oh, well, I'm gonna be on my way home, I'll pick up Sherrell, I'll keep her until you get off of work. Like little things like that made a huge difference. And the people to this day that are still in my life, people who have known me since I was like 5 years old. And even my friends, like I'm hanging out with, like my closest friends are people I've known since I was like in kindergarten.
Wow.
And I was like, damn, I'm old. I'm like, I've known you for 20 plus years. That's insane. You know? And so I think that it's taken some reflection going back into, you know, who were my examples, who were my role models. I had a cousin who went off to school at Clark Atlanta University, and she would send me all kinds of books. She would subscribe me to business magazines. She would send me Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. And she would just try to get into my mind, you know, there's a certain way to do life. And you get to make a choice. It's all about strategy. And so I remember she bought her first house in Atlanta at 19 and had her line sisters from her sorority living in her house and essentially paying her mortgage.
Wow.
So by the time she graduated from college, she had already owned 3 or 4 homes.
Wow.
And so, and I don't even know how she had that sense of foresight, but she was just like reading and like, this is how you build wealth. This is how you put yourself up so you don't have to have the next generation start from zero. So there were just all these like folks that were sharing knowledge.
Just game.
Yeah,
Just
absolutely.
game.
And so I think that, it wasn't just that, it was also I had to have the hustle in me. And I'm also like very, you know, like I said, I had that sense of entitlement. So it was like, if my mom was like, no, I can't do X, Y, and Z, or, you know, that's outside of the budget, this is the bare minimum of what I'm gonna do, I'd have to go and figure out how to get what I wanted. And so that came from, okay, well, listen, I teach tap, I teach this, I'm working at the hair salon, I'm doing X, Y, and Z. I created this business, and so now I have revenue coming in. So now I can make the kind of decision I wanna make. And so that kind of inspired that hustle. So it's like, yeah, it's not enough to just have the inspiration and people investing in you. You also have to be like, I'm willing to go out there and work hard.
Absolutely. That's dope. This is before we get to you and technology. And I know you spent some time at the TAF after school programs and the internships. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, I mean, we're just a couple of blocks away from where I, in high school, went to the Technology Access Foundation. And I think my mom had found this flyer of, we're teaching kids, technology, what have you. And my grandfather, he actually bought me and my cousins our first computers. He was such a gadget guy. He was a carpenter by trade. And he gave us our first computers. So of course, like, I was learning all kind of things. I was printing out my business cards. Like, I probably cost my mom a lot of money in the beginning. And so I think that when she saw the TAF program, she thought, well, this is perfect.
She can use their...
Yeah, and I know that, like, right. And I know that it probably was intimidating because she didn't really know what she was getting me into because her language was not technology. So I'm sure that as a parent, it was a challenge for her to be like, okay, I don't really know exactly what they're doing, but it looks like, at the time, the TTIP program, the Technical Teens Internship Program, not only had the training during the school year, but then there were like college readiness courses, there were interview courses, there was an internship attached to it, and then you got money for college as well. And someone was like, you can't lose, right? Like, I mean, there's no way to lose. And I actually remember after the first year, I was like, well, I don't really have to do this. Maybe I can do something else. I was still dancing at the time, so I was trying to figure out. At the time, I couldn't connect the art and the science. And so I remember having the discussion in the car with my mom, like, I don't know if I'm going to continue on with the program. I mean, it's been okay, but, there are other things that I'm interested in as well. And instead of her just saying, like, no, you're not going to quit the program, she's like, well, think about all the pros and what comes along with it. And so she helped me just think through, like, well, are you really going to have an advantage if you leave this program? And that was probably a really great parenting experience that I had with my mom, where she was just like, I wasn't gonna let you drop out of the damn program, but I wanted you to see the value in what you were getting. And then again, at TAF, it was like they were investing in us. I mean, we were crazy kids. Like, you're coming home, you're coming to school. I want to say classes probably started, they were like from 3:30 to 5:30 or 6:30. So we're coming after school, like kind of hyper, what have you. And then it's like, you still got to get your homework done. Plus you're learning this computer language. And at the time, it's like, even though my cousins were like software developers and what have you, it's not like when they came home, they were showing you the evidence of their work.
Right.
So I didn't really know what was going on. But I will say, like, there was, Sherry, who was there after school every day with the snacks. Like, we knew Sherry was good for the snacks.
Shout out to Sherry.
And she was like the auntie. And I had some really great classmates and, some great instructors. And, it was also kind of finding and navigating your flow. And I don't think I even understood the magnitude of TAF until, again, I left and realized, again, no one else has had these. Like, I've had a very unique upbringing and experiences. And even I think TAF helped us with like SAT classes. And I remember them walking me and my mom through the college application process. And those things that, like, my mom didn't go to college until a little bit later in life, where my mom didn't go stay in some dorm. My mom didn't know how to navigate that kind of stuff. So she had that extra help. So it wasn't just, I think, the impact on me. I think it was also the helping hand for my mom, who was also like, you get to navigate the world very differently than I did. Even though my mother was very successful, it was still like, wait, your lived experience is vastly different from the one that I had growing up in Detroit, Michigan. And so, yeah, it's interesting, like, just the nostalgia of being back in Seattle around the Central District, and then kind of seeing how far TAF has come, because I never knew that the vision was beyond the after school program. Right.
That's deep.
Yeah.
That's deep. And I was, the connection I was going to make earlier was just in the sense of growing up in Washington State and having family in Virginia and Louisiana and all of that. I never recognized that privilege either. And I think most of us don't. Like, I think we're just like, oh, Seattle. Like, nobody really knows Seattle. You go out of town, nobody really knows Seattle. You say you're from Washington, they're like, DC? No. Washington State. And so, but it's not until you start to dig deeper that you're like, oh, hell yeah, we're hella privileged in Seattle. Like, all these tech companies say what you want.
Yep.
But it also equaled, like, a ton of exposure in the classroom when it came to technology, a ton of exposure to just folks in our communities that were connecting us and speaking about all of these innovative things. Boeing.
Yeah.
All these places.
I mean, I did all 4 of my internships at Microsoft.
Yeah.
To this day, I don't believe that Microsoft has any internship programs outside of its Seattle office.
Yeah.
So it's like, just from a proximity standpoint, if you guys ever read like Outliers from Malcolm Gladwell, and you learn about like, Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer had access because of the environment that they were in, right?
Yep.
And even for my case and for the case of those who also went to Taft, like, we just happened to be in a city that valued technology skills training, and someone that came out of that workforce who said, listen, because like, let's be honest, Trish Malines DeZico diagnosed this issue around the gap in technology skills in 96.
Right. Well, 96 is when she actually took the step to do it.
When she took the step to do it. She was volunteering
yeah.
in various capacities prior to then.
Absolutely.
But 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, she diagnosed this thing. And then now all of a sudden we have this array of programming that is occurring. And I'm not saying that it's not good, but Trish was I don't want to say ahead of her time. She was diagnosing it early on.
Right.
She was a pioneer. And she figured out a model that worked. And I think that in and of itself has to be acknowledged and recognized. And I remember when Taft went through some of its tough times.
Yeah. I
remember having conversations with instructors who were like, today's gonna be my last day. Taft has run out of some money. They're still waiting on some checks, but I financially can't be here teaching y'all for free. Right. And I've also seen instructors say, I believe in this. I can work for about 2 weeks for free. If they don't get it together, then I might have to make some other choices for me and my family. Yeah. So I remember the struggle and the challenge. I might not have known all the details, but I remember those hard times of, I could not imagine what was happening on the staff, admin
behind the scenes, yeah.
Right. I'm like, oh my gosh, like if had Taft have failed, it would not have gotten to where it's gone. And I mean, my little cousins now are at the Taft Academy. My cousin, I was gonna call him his nickname. I can't call him his nickname, but my cousin, he graduated from high school, is at the University of Washington. And I have another cousin who will be graduating in a few years, but I think about the opportunity that, someone with a vision kind of brought into fruition. And started off in a storefront property down the street off of Judkins, and we would go right across the street and go buy the ginger and the little dime bags, and I remember that life. I remember being in the hood and then going to this computer program, and I remember my friends not necessarily having a sense of place. I remember them not having anything to do after school.
Right.
And how differently that shaped our experiences.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, well, and then just thinking about what it meant for her to already be an innovator in IT as a Black woman in IT in the 80s herself, in the 70s and 80s herself, to then go and work in this environment. We still think that there aren't enough folks of color in tech. I can only imagine what it was like in the 80s in tech. Yeah. But to have the foresight to not only point out the problem, but to then actually do something about it and put your money and your time and your effort, that's amazing. I
think it is. I mean, Trish is committed. I mean, I can't even commit 6 months to another person. You're talking about 20 years to some badass kids. Sorry.
That's real.
I'm gonna be telling the truth here. Real. But I think about that. I think about when Trish talks about being rooted and being grounded and really seeing something through, because the outcomes are exponential.
Right.
I mean, there's so much thankless work that goes into building and developing and saying, no, you belong here, you deserve a great education, and we're gonna go build it, because we cannot depend on the current systems that were not necessarily designed for our success. And the fact that she's serving populations of individuals who are in our society seen to be as nuisance, from immigrant families to lower income families to whatever. It's like there is a place here, and we believe in your genius. And I think being able to create something for that population, again, I think it's popular. I think there's a lot more outspokenness now, but to have done, I mean, think about how unpopular it is now to be diverse and be like, yo, I'm a person of color, I'm a woman, I'm standing up for myself, and the trolling and the backlash you get from that.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Like, I cannot imagine doing that in the 90s or the early 2000s, right? And then also your money is going to be tied to the popular opinion.
Absolutely. And
so being able to have a vision and bring other people on board, that's the biggest challenge, And so again, I think from the dance center owner to the hairstylist to the software engineer that said, I'm gonna turn this storefront into a computer learning lab and center, like that blows my mind.
Right.
Like, and we're not tracking, and these happen to be Black women, but like no one is really looking at how do these microcosms of community happen? Right. And who are the drivers of those economies? Who are the innovators? And how do we talk about that, in a sense and in a way that that documents why the conversation on gentrification is so significant.
Right.
Because I grew up in this neighborhood, and it's not that it's changing. Cities are going to change. They're supposed to change. Yeah. But when you look at the processes and resources that happen for a certain group of folks that don't happen for others, and when I think about the expansion of the Amazons and Microsofts and what have you, and then I think about the Central District, Beacon Hill, like when I think about these communities being a certain way for such a long period of time, and then I see people of color not being able to access the same wealth that is being imported, or the same talent that's being imported to take over and buy the homes that no one was trying to touch, back in the 90s. Like, it's heartbreaking to me. Right. It really is heartbreaking. And so I'm still grappling with the nuance of it all. But then also still trying to focus on, there are people here who have opportunities sort of wrapped in these business models that if we can case study them and then expand them and scale them, this could potentially be a roadmap for other cities and that are struggling with some of the same challenges.
Absolutely, which is why a part of the reason why we are here. How did you get to writing?
Oh gosh, I feel like I've always been writing. When bookstores were like a thing, so I used to go down to Elliott Bay bookstore. So this is a confession. I hope my mother just listens to this. I would skip school sometimes and go to Elliott Bay and go just sit down in the cafe and read a bunch of books. I didn't have any money, so I couldn't buy the books. I would skip school to go read books because school was such a distraction. I was like, I don't want to learn any of these things.
Yeah, because when you go to a bookstore, you get to choose, or library, right? You get to choose what you want to learn and read about.
I would skip school and I would go to Elliott Bay bookstore and I would learn how to read books. But no, me and my mom, like growing up, we would go to the bookstore. We would go to Barnes & Noble in South Center on Saturdays, and my mother would like let me go off into the kids section. So I read a lot of like Walter D. Myers, of course, like the American Girl story, and and just in my house, like we read. Me and my mom read together, or we'd spend a Saturday like in our own little corners reading, and that was kind of how we did life. And so, what was the original question? Oh, writing. Right. Okay. So I got to a point where when I was older, my mom wasn't all about like corporal punishment anymore, right? So it was like, if I got in trouble, it was, you are going to write out, what happened, where the disconnect was, and how you're going to correct your behavior. Because so I had to express myself and my feelings and things like that through writing. And even to this day, like I keep a journal that just helps me to get things out. And so I didn't realize that writing could be a career. I just assumed, you know, because the message is like, go to school, get a good job, what have you. There was never really a create opportunity for yourself through this medium. And then blogging became a big thing. It wasn't probably until about 2008, 2009 that I started my own blog. I had a beauty blog. I was in fashion school, so I was all about like organic beauty, especially for brown girls, because, you know, all the organic beauty folks were like these pale white chicks, and you're just like, that's cool, but there ain't no shades over here for me, and I don't want toxins in my cosmetics either.
Right.
So so I started writing through that. And at the same time, I was actually going up to Columbia and sitting in on lectures and listening to some of the research studies on what was going on. I mean, I was always sitting in I went to other people's school more than I went to my school. I have this, like, apparently I just was like...
You found your own education?
I always found my own education, exactly. I knew what I wanted to learn and what I was interested in. And so I tried to start navigating towards writing about those things. And then I read Van Jones' book, Van Jones, who used to serve on the White House Council for Green Jobs, and obviously is a big political commentator, and also heads up Prince's Yes We Code. I read his book, The Green Collar Economy. I'd always been into sustainability. You know, being from Seattle, like, they drive, conservation into us.
We recycle.
Exactly. And when I saw his connection between lower income communities and communities of color and the ability to be large long-term participants in the economy through sustainable resources, from needing people to learn HVAC technology and solar panel installation to, the companies in Baltimore and DC that were putting solar panels onto rooftops and making millions of dollars doing this. I thought, oh my gosh, this is how we solve poverty. That was always my thing. This is how we solve poverty in communities of color. And this man is talking about it. Why is Black Enterprise not doing this? Why isn't Ebony talking about this? Why isn't Essence talking about this? And I remember calling up Black Enterprise with a shaky voice, like, so I want to write about the green collar economy, and I want to interview such and such and such and such. I don't think I had any real clips or anything of like things I had been doing, but the editor at the time, Darren Sands, he's now at BuzzFeed, he was like, okay, cool, write about it. Okay. And it was like, oh, and you're going to pay me for this?
Right.
Oh. So then I'm like, me, I'm forever the hustler. I'm like, I can start writing stories and get paid. What? And I mean, my blog had taken off and I had gotten some sponsorship. So I knew the advertising model, but I was like, wait, I can actually get paid to write about things that I care about and about things that I think are important that aren't being talked about in the mainstream. And so I just kept pitching stuff. And I was like, well, I was at this lecture, and Black and Latino girls are starting their periods early because of the estrogen in their hair products. Like, we need to start talking about this. Or Cory Booker did a food stamp challenge, and the president, or not the president, the head of the EPA, Lisa P. Jackson, who's now at Apple, she's going around to churches and talking about environmental justice. And like, I just was digging naturally into things, just being curious about, how do we solve these problems on a larger scale, and how do we talk about them? And so I can't even say my early work was great. It was like, fine, okay. Editors always make you seem smarter than you really are, right? But I tried and I pushed until, I got good feedback, and it kept helping me to grow. And I think I could not have gotten into Columbia with the grades I had in undergrad, because like I told you, I was never there. Like, I mean, I was there for the important things, but I was barely there. So it was that I had a portfolio of work that stayed thematic, and I could show, like, I've been writing about these things for a while. I've been curious about these topics. Like, yeah, my undergrad grades suck, but see, look at what I've accomplished.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So anyways.
I know we're coming to the end and we're short on time. I was gonna ask you, what tips or advice would you give, like, folks who are getting into entrepreneurship, who are maybe doing the 5 to 9 weekend passion projects. What passion projects, writing in their passion planners. What tips would you give them about diving into entrepreneurship?
I would say, think strategy. Be clear that your passion project is not a vanity project. I'm a little biased. Like, I'm tired of people creating things just to create. I think it's wasteful. I think it's not useful. I think when you find a problem and you're trying to solve the problem through your business, I think that's the best way to start a business. And like Instagram and selling tummy tea is not a business. Like it may put some, I'm serious.
Speak on it.
It may put some dollars in your pocket, but again, when I go back to the women that were hiring the teen girls to come help in the hair salon, you know, that put money and resources back into the community. It wasn't just about, look at me, I take cute pictures, what have you. Like, people are literally being killed in the streets. So I always try to approach it from how can I support and empower my community? And then how do I get smart about the resources that I have at my disposal?
Right.
And so I think there's enough people out there that can show you how to get started.
Yeah.
But I think just strategy and knowing your why is the most significant piece of that. And then it is, you're doing your passion. I'm still doing my passion project. I'm going to school full time.
Right.
And then I have other individuals that I contract with to help me run my day to day so that I can be in 3 and 4 places at one time because I have other individuals that are executing on my behalf. And so I think also knowing what is your city going to pay for. I think minority contracting and procurement is the most underutilized resource. And I know that there's going to be some changes happening to the SBA. There's going to be budget cuts, but there's still resources for women and minority businesses that go underutilized. So if you go to the city, if you go sit down with some of these free consultants at the SBA, they'll tell you like what they're giving contracts for. I think it's smart. Like, listen, I've started plenty of businesses with $0 in the bank. And it is a struggle to try to you got to keep landing that next client. You got to keep landing that next sale in order to stay alive, right? But what if you could walk in, talk to an SBA consultant and say, okay, so the city needs IT services. Okay, let me get my business plan together. Let me call up my friends who might be developers, find me a team, put a business together. Now let's go get this $500,000 contract.
That's it.
And now you got long-term sustainability. You've got a city behind you to give you technical assistance, to walk you through compliance. I mean, there's smarter ways to do things. And the great thing is, like, you don't need much money to get started. Right. You can get your website, your domain. You can spend $100. We talk about the $100. There's like the lean startup, $100 startup. I think, what's his name from The Art of Nonconformity created. There's so many different ways and tactics, but I think that the biggest question is, are you making the world a better place because of your product, or you just doing things to like make sure you're good? And I think that's what's problematic in our generation right now.
Are you stunting for the gram?
I agree.
Are you stunting for the gram, or are you making this this world a better place?
I feel like I talked a lot.
No, this was
great. More questions? I'm gonna have a couple more minutes. Y'all got more questions?
Listen,
now y'all got me on a roll.
Right. So where do we want to go next? Do you before I overspeak?
Well, I'm curious what's next. I mean, you've hinted at it throughout the conversation, but
so the Plug Daily will continue to exist. It's growing just every day, almost like it on its own. I want to continue to support writers and reporters that are diving into diverse stories around innovation. So I think that we'll be bringing on a crop of 2 to 3 writers to write about what things that no one else is writing about. So that will continue to grow. And with Black Tech Charlotte, I'm going to continue to build that out. I want it to be much more regional, have much more regional leadership, and move more into almost a matchmaking sort of company where when companies from startups to tech companies to whatever, are looking to fill a position, they're coming to us first and asking for our Rolodex, so to speak. But then we're also a space for technologists and entrepreneurs to get together to meet up with people who could potentially be business partners, or they can get access to resources and know, there's like there's a fund here, there's this here, or what have you. I want to do that. And I think long term, from the writing perspective for myself, is maybe a book or 2. I think that there's a missing link of, I think the from a diverse perspective of business leaders, case studies that we have not evaluated of people who've literally changed communities, but the only people that know about their stories are within the community. Right. I'm surprised there's not an analysis on the life of Bob Santos outside of the Seattle Times story. Right. I think that there are people whose lives, whose body of work is so powerful that to not have that written, I mean, you know, just that's the role of the storyteller. So even what you guys are doing here, like this stuff lives in perpetuity. Right. How do we continue to document people's lives? I mean, their work is thankless again, and it lasts for generations. So how do we learn from it? And if there's no one there to document it, it's like all those stories die as people get older and they age, and they're no longer with us. So I think that's the bigger part of my life work is I want to document. And then I think I want a wine bar when I'm older. I think I just want to like drink wine and read books.
Have you been to the station wine bar?
No.
Go.
Okay.
Next time you're in town, because you're leaving tomorrow. But so they turned the old station into a wine bar.
Wow.
And it's actually it's nice. It's very small, but it's
I love
nice.
it. And that's all I want. I feel like I'm just gonna be like the old auntie that's yelling at the kids, and I'm gonna be drinking wine and having my books.
That's it.
And just yelling, you guys need to get it together. You know, like just something like that.
Get your life.
Right. I'm cool. I'm still easy. I'm still laid back Seattle. So
how can people support what you're doing, and where can they find you?
Yes, so I'm at theplugdaily.com. Definitely subscribe to the newsletter. You know, we send out a daily, literally, 5 top stories each day, our insights and analysis on what's going on in diverse tech and business news. We also send it out weekly for those who don't want their inbox flooded every single day. I'm also at Sherrell_Dorsey on Instagram and Twitter. It's a great way to connect with me, follow some of the work that I have going on. And also some of the work, I always try to promote what other people are doing that I think is really interesting. So it's a great way to find out about just the industry. And then with like Black Tech Interactive, it's like, come out to Charlotte, come see what innovation looks like. Yes. I'm always trying to host tours of people to come and see. Like, I think it helps when we're all learning from each other what's happening in our cities, and exchanging information and advice. And I think generally, like, be a pillar in your community, mentor somebody. Like, don't just wear the t-shirt and, stunt for the gram. Like, get out there, like, just literally do something. I mean, our kids are hurting, our elders are aging. We need strong, I think, leaders. Like, we have to be the kind of people that develop other people to be leaders. And if we don't do that, we are going to see, I think, a grave deficit of folks who are really concerned about the state and the welfare of our communities. So I think that's the biggest call to action for all of us.
That's it. That's it. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
This was fun.
All right.
Farewell, TV land.
Right.